Sports show number 141 for those of you counting at home. I'm Scott Cray. Alongside me, as always, Dolphin Paul. Dolphin, I'd love to ask how your week has been, as I usually do when I pretend that I care. But the fact of the matter is, this show needs to be 2 hours long this week because we have so much to talk about, but we still only have a half an hour.
Far away.
So,
my
how you
week
been?
is good, by the way.
Great? Awesome.
It's hot out. I love the heat. You know me.
This is our post-trade deadline show, and we have tons to talk about as it relates to the trade deadline, especially in Red Sox Nation, which is more about what we didn't get than what we did get. First, though, fresh in our thoughts, shooting the show at this time on Tuesday, I forgot what day it was, Big Papi comes through clutch, bottom of the night, hits a 3-1 blast, and wins yet another ball game single-handedly for us. This man is unstoppable.
Well, it's true. I mean, and he is a man. Make no mistake about that. And, I was watching the game last night at the ninth inning there and thinking, well, here comes Big Papi, chance to get a single, move a guy over. I mean, you almost think, a 3-run homer would be great, but can he do it again?
Right.
I mean, the ball goes over the fence.
Even the announcement of it is like, and Big Papi does it again.
It's almost like a recording. Like,
yeah.
I kind of worry for Big Papi because he is setting the bar so high for himself.
Absolutely.
I mean,
when he doesn't come through, people, I don't know though. There have been times where he's struck out or not gotten the hit we needed in a clutch situation. Nobody's bitching about it the next
I'm just
day.
saying that the expectations are so high. I'm not going to obviously
God forbid if he goes into
dog
a
him when he
slump.
does something bad because I mean he's been the Red Sox most clutch player, probably the MVP in baseball right now. Although
Right.
the designated hitter thing is in everybody's minds. I'm sure we can talk about that at DH whether they should get. But I mean the Red Sox aren't playing well, and he bailed them out. We'd be wallowing in Red Sox misery today if it wasn't for Big Papi. And he just broke Phil Garner's record for a 4-year span, most walk-off game-winning hits, 12, I believe.
Right. He's had 5 game-winning hits in the last 23 days. Game-winning, that means he's responsible for 5 W's on that board. Now, you can't predict if it were a tie game what would happen, but just the same, the fact that he alone is responsible for 5 wins, convert that to where we are in the standings, make those losses. We're sitting in 3rd place right now behind the Yankees and Toronto at this point.
Absolutely. And, I mean, think about this. I was thinking about this also. Has he kind of passed Ramirez as the big guy on the Red Sox?
Well,
I mean, at this point, you'd have to say yes.
Right.
Just by his stats. I mean, he's a $20 million player. Or he should be. I mean, the Red Sox found this guy. You want to talk about finding a guy off the scrap heap.
Right.
I mean, Minnesota let him go. It wasn't even a trade.
Right.
And he slowly climbed.
And we paid him nothing
we
money
had nothing
for the first couple of years.
For the first few years. We talked about that before on the show.
Yep.
If you average in his salary from those first 3-4 years with his salary for the next 3 or 4 years, one of the biggest bargains in baseball.
Absolutely.
Imagine this guy being a free agent at the end of the year.
And you know what I like about him?
Unbelievable.
He never bitches about a thing. He doesn't complain about his salary. He doesn't complain about extensions. He doesn't complain about Manny. Now, you bring up a good point. Has Ortiz surpassed Manny in the value thing? As far as a valuable player, I'm not so sure because Manny's not the greatest left fielder on the planet, but he's pretty damn good in left field
He
at
can throw
Fenway.
people out.
Oh, he sure can.
He can throw people out.
He's pretty darn good at Fenway, so that makes him a little more worthy because Ortiz doesn't play a position.
Well, I'm not saying there'd be, you could get rid of one. I think both, there's value to having both. Obviously, they help each other out, they protect each other, and so forth. But I just think right now, I mean, when you think of the Red Sox, it used to be Ramirez.
Right.
I mean, now I think it's Ortiz.
As far as fan favorite goes, it's definitely Ortiz.
I mean, I think even across the country, if you mention to somebody the Red Sox, the first word, they'd probably say Ortiz.
Right. And it's all about the fact that Ortiz has this thing about him where he's a big teddy bear. You see him hugging all the guys. He's lovable. He's playful. He's got a great nickname. Manny being Manny is, nothing wrong with Manny, believe me. But the fact of the matter is that you got the Manny being Manny, which is more of a attitude adjustment thing than anything else, versus Big Papi. Everybody has put him up. You don't hear people scream MVP when Manny gets up.
Our fine producer Frenchie, who's welcome back, by the way. Frenchie.
Yes.
Come back after having a few physical ailments, and now he's back strong.
He's got 3 eyeballs now.
He's got 3 eyeballs. Hey, listen, stop hanging around those high wires. No, but he made a good point that Manny, Manny hasn't complained either. Manny
Right.
just goes along. So I know
that's how
sometimes
Manny
we
is. He
dog
doesn't
Manny.
care.
Well, but this isn't a case where just Manny being Manny is good.
Right.
He kind of just follows along. He's there to greet Ortiz. He's not.
Can you imagine Barry Bonds in the in the four hole?
So I mean, all those guys are just having fun right now, and Ortiz is not only do we have to put him obviously in Red Sox history, he could possibly be, as of right now, the most clutch player in Red Sox history.
Oh,
possibly.
guaranteed.
I know Iass in '67, with the great years, obviously before
The
our
fact
time.
that Iass is coming up in conversations means he's at least approached
Not
that
only
point.
in baseball, now you've got to put him in all sports.
Right.
Clutch. I hate to
Getting
say
there.
it, Tom Brady.
Right.
Joe Montana. Michael Jordan. I mean,
The key will be to see how this team plays out, because if they go one and done in the playoffs, then he's going to take a little hit with that, and it's not his fault, but that's just the way it is.
I think it depends how it plays out, how
Right.
they make the playoffs and so forth. But Big Papi did it again as we speak, and just incredible. I mean, I don't know how. I think people have run out of adjectives for him.
I'll tell you, like you mentioned, the Red Sox are not only lucky to have him in the most obvious ways, but also the fact that the Red Sox, without him, would have absolutely lost that game, and the Red Sox would be the next day the GOAT. They'd be talking about how they should have never lost that game, how the team is not playing well. But the fact of the matter is, this guy's keeping him in it, and it overshadows the negatives of the Red Sox, and there are plenty right now. The Red Sox, by no means, are playing, any kind of outstanding baseball. They've drifted off since that big NL run that they had a while back.
Yeah, they're 500 right now. They're last 10, so they're pretty average. I mean, not that the Yankees are setting the world on fire, and
Right.
we'll get to them. They made some moves, but
Right, they sure did.
I mean, the Sox are still 22 games over 500, which is pretty good. Unfortunately, they brought in Wells yesterday.
Now, a couple.
This pitching staff has still got a lot of question marks.
Well, Wells comes back and sucks, and I don't know if any of you in Red Sox Nation were surprised by that, but if you were, you sure as heck shouldn't have been, because this is what you have to expect. The guy, for some reason, absolutely refuses, or the team doesn't let him, do a rehab assignment. This is time again this has happened. He doesn't do any rehab. He just comes straight into Boston and gets blown away, and that's exactly what happened. Now we got to add Trot Nixon and Veritek to the list of injuries, hopefully both minor, but just the same, they're going to be out of the lineup for a little while.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Yankee fans and the Yankee organization's not going to be crying boo-hoo for the Red Sox, because they've got their own
They've still got their own problems.
So, I mean, these things happen, and they're going to have to weather the storm, as we talked about earlier. They didn't really do much. Well, they didn't do anything
Right.
in this whole trading deadline, in the non-waiver anyway. So,
Real quick, one more Red Sox thing I want to mention. Something that kind of occurred to me within the last week or so while watching this lineup, and it's a pretty consistent lineup as far as what Francona puts out there. As far as the batting order goes, he hasn't mixed it up a ton other than giving Loretta a day off, and I think he gave the shortstop a day off over the last few days. My boy Mike Lowell. Okay, at the beginning of the season, he came over, and I said nothing but great things about him, and most of them have come true. Home run totals are a little higher than you expected. His RBI totals are a bit higher than you expected. And I think at the time we both agreed that he was, obviously a good defensive third baseman. Why is Lowell not batting in that 5-hole behind Ortiz and Manny? You have Ortiz, Manny, 3-4, and then you have, at the time, Trot Nixon in there, Veritek in there. Before you even get to Lowell, Lowell is a doubles machine. He's meant to bring guys in. Can you possibly explain to me, or Frenchie, if you're in there and you could possibly, can someone explain to me why Lowell is not in that 5-hole to add a little better protection to Manny, as opposed to Jason Veritek, who has the worst, at one point, average on the entire baseball team of the Boston Red Sox?
Well, I don't know about so much Nixon, but I'm not a big fan.
Basically, it goes Veritek, Nixon, and then Lowell.
I'm not a big fan of.
Has Lowell? Are you going to tell me you're not a fan of Lowell?
No, I'm not
He
a
has
big
not
fan
proved
of.
enough?
I probably shouldn't say this because I told you this before. Jason Veritek.
Oh, right.
Great guy, great competitor, captain of the team. I'm sure he's great in the locker room.
Calls a great game.
Calls a great game. I think $10 million, he's one of the most overpaid players in baseball. I'm sorry.
From more of a batting stance?
Yes.
I mean, he doesn't
Well,
exactly
he doesn't
throw
do
guys
anything
out
on
left
the
and right
offense.
either.
I mean, he's not a very good hitter. Every once in a while, he'll do something. And I hate to do that because he's your typical hard-working Boston guy. I mean,
Trot
quiet,
Nixon.
always running. Yeah, a la Trot Nixon. Yeah, I would absolutely. I just think Lowell's in a comfortable spot. I mean, I know what you're saying. I just don't think it's that big an issue that you're
That's
making
a
it
good
out.
point with the comfortable spot. Maybe Lowell likes.
Yeah, and you
to
need
hit
something
where
at the
he is.
bottom of the order too. I mean, when you come down to Lowell, but
Yeah,
like,
I
listen,
suppose.
but Lowell, you know, you want to talk about a guy? You're right. You call it, and I told you this before. I say, I tell you when you're right.
Give me credit. It's
I
once
give
every
you credit
blue
every
moon,
once in a
but-
while because that's unfortunately the only time you're right is once in a while. You know?
Hey, I throw so many birds out there, you never know.
Yes,
Something's gonna
fly.
happen.
Some bird's gotta fly.
Hey, they're gonna change baseball to a 5-bag.
But you called it on Lowell, and he was kind of a throw-in with Josh Beckett. But
We didn't want him.
This guy has been outstanding, and they almost made a deal for him because
was on the trading
he is
block.
getting paid a lot of money. So
Right.
next year he'll be getting paid a lot of money, and his trade value is at its highest point
Absolutely.
probably that it might ever be. So, but
Well, he was pretty good up until those last couple of years in Florida. He just drifted off. Now all of a sudden he's back
He's
again.
been solid, so he's been a big plus between him and Beckett. Now you get two guys instead of really the one guy that most people thought we were getting.
Right.
They'll take Lowell's contract, and we all thought, well, they're just throwing him in because they had to take his contract.
They
It
weren't
is a
thrilled
lot of
about
money
it.
for him, but you know what? You could argue his $9 million is worth more than Veritek's $10 million.
And his defense alone has saved runs
He
for
makes
this
some
baseball
good
game.
plays. So
Last thing about Poppy real quick, he is now 9th in his career in most walk-off home runs, which pushes him to a little higher on the list. You have 5 guys at 12, Tony Perez at 11, and then 4 guys, Harold Baines, which is kind of funny, at 10. So he's only a few away now from moving up that list. No particular reason why with the team he plays for that can't happen.
I mean, I'm curious to see where Big Poppy ends up in 5 or 6 years. I mean,
Yeah.
we could be looking at one of the best hitters of all time, or best sluggers of all time.
Kind of a late bloomer, too. He's not
Yeah,
exactly
kind
a
of.
young guy.
I would say
Yeah,
so.
mid-
Kind of a late bloomer. I mean, he didn't
Midlife
tear it out.
crisis.
But you know what? There were people saying that when he came over from Minnesota that if you played him more often, because his numbers projected out pretty good. I don't know what happened in Minnesota, but if you projected his numbers out, the minutes he played, if you took those numbers and projected them out, that
He'd have some
his numbers
solid
were pretty
numbers.
good. But
It's
apparently-
weird that they couldn't read that. I wonder if they're still kicking themselves in the butt.
I remember
or if
when he
they're
came
over
to
it
the
now.
Sox, he slowly built his way up too.
Right.
He's in the lineup. Well, he should play more. He should play more. He should play more. All of a sudden, he just busted out, and
Well, for what it's worth,
Incredible.
Minnesota lately has been capable of scoring runs in the teens in double digits, so, they're doing just fine. Hey, let's move on to this trade stuff. We've got a lot to talk about. We'll start things off. I know Jen, Yankee Jen in the behind the glass there, you know what I mean, wants us to start off with the
Yankees
Yankees.
win.
We'll start off with the Red Sox, though, first. Pretty much nothing, for the most part. I mean, technically, they acquired right-handed pitcher Brian Corey for they gave up the reliever down in I believe it's Pawtucket, Louis Mendoza. A lot of things that could have happened and nothing did. At one point, you mentioned Lowell was in a mix along with Crisp and Lester. There was some talks about trying to pick up Roy Oswalt from Houston, which I'll tell you what, I don't know how you feel about that, but I would have done it in a heartbeat to pick up a stud pitcher. Roy Oswalt would come onto this team, and even with Schilling and everyone else that's on this staff, Roy Oswalt would be your number one guy, guaranteed, flat down. And to give up Chris, Lowell, and Lester, I wouldn't see that to be a problem, but for whatever reason, somebody didn't pull the trigger.
yeah, I guess Lester was the major stumbling block in all these trades. I guess they're very high on Lester, and
Right.
I'm kind of torn about it because Oswald, and there was talk of Andrew Jones. I guess they were gonna maybe get Andrew Jones and then flip him over for Oswald. There was talk of Jason Schmidt.
Yep.
Maybe coming over, but that'd only be a rented situation because he was going to
He's
go back
done
to
up.
San Fran.
Right.
So,
Schmidt would have been another one that would have been a great
The
pitcher.
Yankees made a move for Bobby Abreu.
Right.
And they got Corey Lytle. So they made a couple of moves, straightened themselves, and I guess that the Sox just held their ground. I would have liked to see them make some type of move to bring
Absolutely.
another arm in here. I mean, that's just my opinion.
You got to be
Epstein came-
disappointed with the fact that the Red Sox have needs.
Yep.
They made phone calls from major players like Oswalt. We'll talk about the Rocket in a second and the possibilities that were there. Major baseball players, major moves. they didn't pull the trigger. The fact that they were looking at major players means they know that there's a need, and they're questioning how far they can go into the postseason if they make it there with the team that exists now, and that's just the way it's going to be. That's the team the way it is now.
Well, I mean, Epstein came out and said they have a long-term plan, so, I guess Lester especially, I would have given up any other guy. And you know what, for Oswald, if they could keep him for a few years, I probably would have given up Lester. I mean, it's one of those situations where Lester's 5-1, he could turn out to be a bust, but
he could be a bust.
He could also be a tremendous player.
He could be a stud, but the thing is that he's a stud right now in the eyes of other people, and so you could have really gotten something for him. If he turns out to be a bust when he gets up to this level, then what? You know what I mean? You pretty much.
Well, that's a chance they took. They didn't do anything. It was anticlimactic. We've been talking about a month for players available. Trades.
A long-term plan. Has he been hanging around the Celtics a little too long, and Danny Ainge?
Well, but they've made the playoffs. I mean, the Sox have been pretty consistent, so you really can't dog the Epstein administration too much.
No.
They have made the playoffs, and, listen, they do have some young players. I mean, if Hansen and Lester could be solid pitchers, then we might look back at this and say, boy, they made a good move.
Right.
It's just one of those situations that we're not going to know about until a year or two. I agree, it's anticlimactic, and they certainly have some problems. It would have been nice to get an Oswald or even an Andrew Jones, even though they probably wouldn't have kept him. Even a Schmidt, but I don't know how hard they tried with Schmidt. Those were just
Well, we'll talk about trying hard for a second. The Red Sox would have been more than happy to pick up the Rocket Roger Clemens after not getting him back in May when they fought alongside the Yankees and the Rangers to try to get him and not go to Houston. Houston has played terrible baseball offensively in the Rocket starts, and I think the Rocket was more than happy to move but didn't say anything. And ownership in Houston, according to this article from Jason Stark on ESPN.com, ownership basically selfishly said, we have a chance to win here, and we can only do it with the Rocket. We're going to hold on to him. I mean, come on. Doesn't the Rocket deserve enough respect at this point that just let the guy go to a winning team, a la Greg Maddux going from the Chicago Cubs, who all you're fighting off there is Pittsburgh, going to a winning team with the potential of finishing his career in a good way.
Again, apparently he came close. It just didn't work out. And I guess at the end, Roger just, that is his hometown. I guess he just wanted to hang around. I don't think they were, they were somewhat close to pulling the trade, but it wasn't something where, they changed their mind or they couldn't agree on prospects.
Right.
I think they came close. And
I don't see this as a Rocket thing. I see this as the GM, Papura, whoever he is, the GM from Houston, not pulling the trigger. And again, selfishly thinking they have a chance to, and maybe they do. I don't know. The Rocket has a 2.09 ERA this season, and there were at least 2 starts that the Rocket had that Houston got blanked. They didn't put up a single run. I mean, come on. Let the Rocket go. Let him go to a winning team. Get something for him while you still can.
I don't know why they got the Rocket in the first place.
True.
I mean, I'm glad for the Rockets getting millions of dollars for about 3 months' work, but I told you before, I didn't understand that whole situation to begin with.
McLean, that's who we were talking about for the owner of the
it's
Houston
not like
Astros.
They're completely out of it, but it's a long shot because they'd have to pass a lot of teams.
Of course it's a long shot. And it just bugs me because we could have done so much having him in our lineup.
Well, just about everybody made some type of move except the Red Sox.
Yeah.
I guess Red Sox fans are a little miffed, but a lot of people said they'd go with what they had if nothing happened.
And that's the way it is. Yankees, however, decide they're going to make a run for, obviously, the postseason, but more importantly in their eyes now, they're going for a division win by, like you mentioned earlier, picking up right-hander Corey Lytle to put into their much-needed pitching rotation, and, most importantly, to put out in right field, Bobby Abreu, kind of a stud, having a little bit of an off year this year, but absolutely no reason why he can't turn that around and turn into his old self. Man, the Yankees, they gave up half their farm. I think there was a total of like 5 farm players they gave up to Philly and Pittsburgh for all this because they also, picked up a couple of other guys in the mix. It's just unbelievable that the Yankees keep giving up their farm year and year and year again, keep improving their team. Just when you think that there isn't enough of a bat in that lineup, they add another big one.
I mean, how about that line? How about that lineup? If you're a pitcher, okay, you're starting your first game in the playoffs. and you face Jeter, Giambi, A-Rod,
Abreu,
you know, Matsui will come
will be back.
You know, who knows what's going to happen with Sheffield.
I was going to get to that, too.
I mean, wow, you know, I mean, they can put Abreu, they can put him in, they probably wouldn't put him in a 2-hole, maybe 4 or 5. I mean, boy, as far as a batting lineup, wow, you better have some pitching to combat that. And again, it's a long season. Yeah,
Right.
I gotta say it at least once a show.
At least once a show.
It'll be interesting to see if the Red Sox can hold on here with this kind of makeshift pitching staff right now, with Wakefield being hurt, and who knows what we're gonna get out of Wells. I mean, you know.
I know what we're gonna get out of Wells. Not much of anything.
You know, Lester is filled in nicely. You know, Papelbon, middle relief. Who knows? But I mean, they've been able to hold on. They're hitting right now is suspect.
Right.
Basically, if you look at the Red Sox stat, it's a two-man team. 2.5, you throw Lowell in there, and
Yep.
Nixon's had a decent year, but he's hurt now too. So
Well, I mean, you got Euclid in there doing things. Chris could be a little better.
it's kind of been a disappointment. He was on a trading block too. And,
Yeah.
You know, he started okay for the Sox, but now, you know, there's rumblings too that he's not the greatest guy in the locker room.
Well,
there's a lot of pressure now with him.
I heard the same thing, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that he knew he was on the trading block. Don't believe a word any player says when they say trading time has come along and they hadn't even realized it, because they know when they're on the trading block. And apparently Coco Crisp has been a little bitter towards the media, and maybe possibly bitter in the locker room. You know, and it might be because he doesn't want to get traded.
Yes,
but he's safe now.
Somebody on ESPN came out with that, and
Wasn't Howard Reynolds, was it?
I don't think so. I don't know how accurate that was.
We don't even have him on the list
Harold
to talk
the
about.
Molester?
Oh, man, I'm telling you. All right, let's move along. So the Yankees did their thing, and how important is this for them to add a decent arm into their rotation and a big bat in their lineup? You know, the only thing is they've showed that their pitching can give up 15 runs. It's happened twice this year to teams that aren't all that good. So,
well, they got the bat, but they didn't exactly make a blockbuster move on the pitching front.
right.
Corey Lytle's okay if he can hold on the back end. The rotation, he'll be okay. So,
Yep.
You know what? If they had gotten an Oswald or something, I'd be more worried. But you can have all the bats you want, but we know when it comes to playoff time, you're going to have the pitching. So,
Right.
I mean, that's what it's all come down to. So I think pitching is still going to win this thing, and we'll have to see who comes up with the better performance. You know,
Right. Well, elsewhere in the league, let's start off with the AL East.
A lot of trades.
Oh yeah, compared to remember last year, we were talking about how ridiculously dead it was. Blue Jays, the moves they made aren't even worth talking about. They got a pitcher, Jeremy Arcaro, for Shea Hillenbrand. That's not even worth talking about.
You're not good with those foreign names.
Blue Jays decided they're going to keep things as they are. The Orioles did nothing, although we'll talk about later on about some of the players that didn't go. Tejada was on that list, and he didn't go anywhere. Devil Rays basically sent Julio Lugo over to the Dodgers, who we were talking about for a while, Julio Lugo, and acquired 2 more young players. So they're making their way to being one of the youngest teams in all of baseball. The White Sox tried desperately to add Alfonso Soriano. Now, tell me if you would not have Konerko, Tomei, who's their other big bat in that lineup? I'm missing somebody. Konerko, Tomei, they've got one of the best 3, 4, 5 punches in the league. Frenchie, you remember who I'm talking about here? Konerko, Tomei, and somebody else. Imagine adding Soriano to that mix, to that batting lineup. That would have been ridiculous. Instead, Pasednik. Not Pasednik.
Brzezinski.
The big bat that they have. Jermaine Dye. That's the best, 3, 4, 5 or 2, 3, 4 punch you can find. They didn't get Soriano. I think Red Sox fans at home should be, at this point, because that would have been unbelievable power to add to Chicago, especially a team that has not been hitting well right now. They picked up McDougal. We talked about that last week. They were one of the earliest moves in baseball.
But they still trail Detroit, who's an unbelievable story in itself.
Right. So it's funny. Chicago actually gave up a total of 6 minor league players. So they're kind of going the Yankees route, giving up half their farm. And they're in the same type of situation. They're looking to win now, for the most part. Twins picked up Kyle Loesch, a team that we could be concerned about because they're all of a sudden back in the mix again. I'm sorry, they lost Kyle Loesch and picked up a young pitcher in Zach Ward, so they're trying to improve their pitching. They've showed the last couple weeks they could certainly improve in their bats. By the way, they're doing all this run scoring without Torrey Hunter, who's been on the DL. Imagine getting him
they
back.
almost have the Red Sox record. They're 61-43, while the Sox are 63-41. But the difference is they're 8.5 out from the Tigers, who are a staggering 35 games over 500.
Detroit just will not stop.
Absolutely incredible.
I don't know if I have. Oh, yeah, the Tigers. Here we go. Oh, they picked up Sean Casey, who we were just watching before we came on the set, and people were saying, Sean Casey, a joke of a bat. Why would the Tigers even bother? I beg to differ. Sean Casey is a lefty that they need in this lineup, and he's a run producer. I think that's a great move by Detroit. They only gave up a minor league pitcher for it, so you add a lefty somewhere in your lineup that can score some runs. That's an outstanding move by Detroit. I give Detroit credit for even making a move in a situation.
That's a pretty good move. I mean, sometimes a guy like that with a change of venue. I mean, they're already 35 games over 500. It's not like he's a savior.
Right.
So do you bring a guy like that in only to fortify your team? So a lot of teams made a lot of moves. So it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out.
Yep.
I mean, if the Red Sox falter down a stretch, let's face it, Theo's probably going to be criticized for not making a move.
Yep.
If they hold on and win the division, and Lester turns out to be good, we can say, well, it's a good thing Theo held his ground.
As much as the Red Sox will get criticized for not making a move if they're not successful, it's nowhere near the criticizing that Houston is going to get. And I already talked about the Rocket. They had Brad Lidge, a really good closer up until this year, but there's no reason why a change of scenery can't change that. And Roy Oswalt, we already talked about. It's unbelievable that Houston is going for this run here. You know what? They better do something because they're going to get booed out of town otherwise. Wrapping things up, the Dodgers. How about Greg Maddux, we talked about earlier, leaving Chicago, who is basically sitting in the cellar, and going to the Dodgers, who is a contender now. Who would expect that a 40-plus-year-old guy would be getting traded at this point? And is probably his last year in his career, by the way.
Probably. It was interesting that the last game he pitched for Chicago, he waved to the crowd because they kind of had an idea that this was it. So, again, it's sometimes you go to a contender, it becomes a whole different ball game when you're not pitching.
As you hear this time of year, it's contender or pretender at this point.
Absolutely. And I think this year is a year where there's just a lot of teams in the mix, a lot of wild card teams in the mix. In the mix, a lot of good teams.
Yep.
So it's a little bit of a different year than just 2 or 3 horses making moves. It seems like everybody made a move except our own Red Sox. So
for the most part,
again, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
2 more teams that people might care about. The Brewers made some big moves, picking up former Red Sox infielder Tony Graffinino. Remember him? Those of you who are wondering, he now plays for the Milwaukee Brewers.
I just have a question. Is there anybody who would care about the Milwaukee Brewers?
Yeah, because they picked up...
Have you ever met a Milwaukee Brewers fan?
They picked up Kevin Mench. I think Dave Betancourt was a Brewers fan at one point.
He's out there.
More importantly, the Brewers picked up Francisco Cordero, a pretty darn good reliever in himself. And
a good jockey, too.
Not relieving on himself, but in himself. The biggest one we haven't talked about yet, I saved it for last, with Milwaukee. The Texas Rangers picking up Carlos Lee, easily within the top 10 in bats in all of Major League Baseball.
That was a pretty good move,
now.
and they didn't give up a ton for him.
Cordero was the big one that they lost out of that
That's something
deal.
The Red Sox were rumored too with Carlos Lee, but I guess that never materialized.
Right. So to wrap things up on this wonderful trading show, talk about some of the players that were not moved. Barry Zito. Apparently Oakland's going to go for a run for it, and they're saying they can't do it without Zito. Of course, Soriano, which is unbelievable because we figured he would get
Soriano went to
traded.
Hada with the 2 big names who were rumored, and they kind of stayed put.
Milwaukee and the Angels, for those of you who are wondering what happened with Tejada, Milwaukee and the Angels wanted to take him, move him to 3rd. He said no. So
in other news, I'll be on vacation next week in my second
Thank
hometown
God.
in Florida. So.
Frenchie mentioned he might want to be on the show. So
that'd be great. I would be on it if Frenchie took my spot on the show. Absolutely.
It's a sports show at yahoo.com. We expect you to come back with some Miami. I would never want to go to Miami at this time of year. You're insane. Thanks to Jen, and I don't know if Mitch was involved, but I'll thank him anyway because he's cleaning air vents right now, and we're happy with that. Thanks to Frenchie. We'll see you next show. Thanks for watching, everybody.